So, another new day and another new RB video. This is what I've learned in RB over the span of the last 24 hours or so. And I've learned quite a bit. Now, yesterday was a mixed bag of frustrations where I had some really good games, but then a lot of bad games. Yesterday, I would say in particular, I probably had about 10 or so zero-kill games, which is really frustrating to be in because it's kind of like, well, what am I doing wrong? I'm trying to do different things. But I think, if anything, the main thing that was making me go wrong so many times was my emotions getting the best of me. Where a lot of times I was going into situations where I was outnumbered, thinking, I'll be fine, I can take on these, opponents, whether it's 2 versus 1 or whatever it might be, 3 versus 2, 4 versus 2, thinking I could just be some sort of Hercules. But in the end, coming out defeated and getting more and more frustrated and letting it build up so that the next game I went into, I was just letting that frustration get into me and it was making me do stupid mistakes. So I think in the end I had to sort of realize that, RB is a more slower paced game. You can't let your emotions get to you because usually that's just going to let you or lead you into death, bad situations. So when I started streaming yesterday, I was using the LA7 and I had a multitude of those zero-kill games and I got really frustrated. Was it the plane or was it myself? I think it was both a mixture of the plane being a little bit crocky and I'm not sure if that's even a word, but also myself getting a bit too heated and not approaching my encounters correctly. So after seeing one of my teammates using the Yak 9P really well, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to give the LA7 a break. Let's use the Yak 9P. And the first game I go into, I got a really decent game. Where, for example, there you go, the F4U1C. Very easy target to go for. Got a nice cross shot on him and took him out. That guy, unfortunately, not getting any shots on me. Well, unfortunately for him, fortunately for me. I think he was not hot enough on his trigger finger. He had a perfect shot, it looked like. But he wasn't hot enough on his trigger finger. And he didn't do any damage for me, or to me, so that was nice. And instead of just going back into that dogfight where there's a Spitfire, who could probably outturn me, I decided to break some distance, and since my teammates are around, it's going to make them occupied and take away their attention on me. So after breaking that distance, I decided to go back in after reassessing what's actually going on, and then there's a Spitfire in front of me, decided to go on a head-on, and take him out. The nice thing about the Yak 9P is the fact that it has 2 different caliber guns on it. It has a 23mm and a 20mm. You can also swap it out, so you've got a 37 instead of the 23. And I asked you guys on the stream, what do you think is better to use, a 37 or a 23? And a surprisingly amount of people said the 37. I was expecting the 23 to get the majority votes because, I mean, it's a really powerful cannon, as you might have noticed in my head-on encounters or just the guys that I killed so far. It's done a lot of damage. And there we go, another head-on encounter leading into another kill for me. 3 kills right there. And it's very dangerous what I'm doing, but I feel really confident in my head-ons. Where, especially the zooming in tactic, I feel makes it so much easier to lead your shots. If you don't zoom in, I find it a lot harder. And before I used to be a big advocate about not zooming in, but then I started zooming in and it helps so much. Maybe in arcade I wouldn't do it, but in RB it really is a game changer, or and gives you the advantage in head-on situations, I feel. And so, making quick work of 2 people in head-ons, pretty damn nice to do because I've got the gun calibers to do it. Tried to go in for another one, just hits, but not amounting to a kill, unfortunately. All of these planes that I'm taking on in head-ons are very, very risky to be taken on because Tempest, Spitfire, F4U1Cs all have cannons. It's a bit of a dice roll. Anything could happen. Anything could happen. So I tried to go for the Tempest down there. It's just the last remaining people on the enemy team. But I definitely don't think, I'm not sure about the 37mm cannon, because it only has so much ammo, and, well, I mean, do you really want to rely on 37 rounds? I mean, if you get behind somebody, maybe it's great, but I think I'm much more of a spray and pray kind of person. The 23 seems to be working pretty darn well. Well, there you go. They went into a head-on, and Well, they lost, both of them. It's just what happens sometimes, isn't it? When you break distance and then you're so close to each other, when you go into that head-on, then there you go. So after chasing this Tempest across the map, I decided to go down on him. But obviously, gotta drop my throttle whenever I'm gonna be going down a big distance. So the last thing I want to do is ripping off my wings or leading into high G situations. Saluting the target quite well here. Tempest, double flame, near the return to battlefield border. Oh man, that thing scares me ever since what I showed you guys yesterday of how you go in the border and then all of a sudden your plane explodes. Now on to the next clip. So that was 4 kills. A really nice game that I had yesterday. On to the next clip. This one isn't in particular anything amazing that I'm going to be showing you, but it's actually just the niceness, I guess, if that's even a word, the kindness, there you go, the kindness of certain people in RB, where, as you might notice, my water temperature is extremely high, and I joke about it with my teammate Blanca, telling him, well, look at my water temperature, it's like 271 degrees right now, haha, sort of thing. But then one of my teammates, being really kind, actually points out the fact that, hey, Dion, you're leaking of water. And I'm like, what? What do you mean, bro? And even another teammate asked, how can you tell? And this is something that I never realized. Obviously, when you get to such a high water temperature, well, you start to spew out water. And as you can see, that evaporation trail, that condensation, I guess, behind me, it's actually my water coming out of my engine. Huh, I never knew that. And that black smoke is your oil, if you just wanted to know as well. But it's a really useful thing to know, and I'm sure a lot of you already knew that. But it's just a nice thing to know if you haven't already known that. That water trail is coming out of your engine if you let your water get to such a high temperature, which is a really damn easy thing to do in the Typhoon Mark 1B. And finally, onto the third clip. This is another game that I had, but it was a nighttime map, which I find particularly quite scary to be on at times, because if in real life there is a lot of sunshine and that happens to land directly on my monitor, it leads to glare moments, and it makes it particularly hard to judge where the ground is, because it makes everything look near enough pitch black. So the ground being hard to see, the enemies being hard to see, but today's actually quite a cloudy day, so it's fine. Putting down my combat flaps kind of stupidly there, because I was just hoping that I could outturn my opponent, or try to make my turns better, but not looking at my speed at the moment. So that's something that I've come to realize that I have to do. Looking at my speed at all times, and it's just one of these habits that you don't have in arcade battles, because irrelevant of what speed you're at, your flaps will never break off, your wings will never break off, and that's something that you just don't worry about in arcade. So it's one of those habits that I have, and it's something that I'm trying to break at the moment when I'm playing RB, by looking at my speeds at all times. Not at all times, but periodically, and especially when I'm contemplating if I should use any sort of flaps. So after losing my flaps, which is a really unfortunate thing, because it is quite important to at least have your combat flaps, they do help in lower speed situations, I get into this awkward situation where I've got 2 enemies on me. Rather than going around with this turn, because I've actually learned from a previous game that, well, the Typhoon is not a great turn fighter at all. Even if you might have the initial jump on somebody, it doesn't roll. It doesn't roll, and that's a really big problem. And then people can easily outturn you, especially if they're using Russian planes. They can easily outturn you or even outroll you. And so the best thing to do in the Typhoon is just to speed away. And so using one of my arcade habits, which I think actually translates over quite well in RB, I started spazzing out my controls to try and make it harder for my opponents to hit me. And so they broke off, perhaps due to maybe the distance I was creating between us, but also perhaps because my teammate started coming down. I'm putting some pressure on them. So I didn't want to leave him by himself, and I wanted to actually help him out. So after making that distance, I decided to go back in to the heat of the combat, But now it was a choice between who do I want to go for, the Yak 3 or the LA5F. I decided to go for the Yak 3 because he was a slower target. The LA5 just came out of a dive, and so he's probably going to be harder to hit. Got a nice pilot unconscious on the Yak 3, and so the LA5 is just lining himself up perfectly. He might be even tunnel visioning right now, where he's not even aware or even caring about who's behind him, myself, because he was chasing after somebody, which is a lot of times a fatal mistake and can lead to death. So lining up the LA5 because he was in a stall or losing his speed as he was climbing up made it a really easy target to go for. And now this is another lesson that I'm about to learn here. The P63 goes up into a climb. I decide that I should be able to line up my shots on him, and so I follow him in this turn. I was thinking that a P63 surely can't be that great of a turn fighter, and maybe if I go into like a hammerhead, then I can get on top of him. But that was my fatal mistake, and that just lined me up because it put me in a stalling position where the P63 could just continue his turn and then kill me. So the lesson that I learned in that was that's just doing a simple belly flop hoping that you can outturn somebody isn't necessarily going to turn out how you expected. Where just pitching up is not the best way of turning. What I should have done was probably go off to the side as I was climbing up, to go off to the side and then drop to the side. Or in fact, maybe what I should have done was just flown simply away. So now in hindsight, obviously I shouldn't have just pitched up like that. Was not the correct maneuver to do, and just made me line up for that P63. And in the end, it's learning how to predict how situations are going to turn out. And I feel like that's such an important skill in RB, and I feel like that's something that comes with experience and just time, is learning how to predict where your opponents are going to be, what they're going to be doing, and also how you should respond to that correctly. So that's something I feel like will probably come with experience, and got to learn the hard way, I guess. Got to learn the hard way. I mean, who doesn't, right? But alright guys, that is what I've learned over the course of the last 24 hours. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe it taught you a few things. If not, I hope it was popcorn worthy for entertainment. Alright guys, until the next video, this is Krebs, and I'll catch you guys next time. The way we kick it in the dojo is local for show.